Hello. I
Hello.
think we have everything ready now.
Yes, I hope so. I don't know if that's all right. Is placing okay? I see the video is unavailable on YouTube.
I was told that it was already working. Let me check.
I think that sometimes it takes a few minutes, but then it has a delay. So when it starts recording, it already starts.
Yeah, there should be some delay.
Let's see. Okay.
What do I need to? Working? Yes, it's already working.
It is?
Yes, Riva, you can be assured. Yeah.
Okay, because I have both. Okay.
I already checked.
I don't see it here because I opened parallel session 2, right?
And it says video unavailable, right?
Yeah, and it says watch on YouTube. Okay,
yes.
Here we are.
If you click on watch on YouTube.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Professor Giftopoulos might join us. He had an emergency. We have obstacles today, but that's a good thing, maybe. We'll see at the end. So I would like to introduce each other before we start talking, and very fast and quickly, not read the whole CV, but I am really excited that a lot of you are experts, are already working or researching on heritage matters, because we do touch on heritage, on tradition. I have sent you kind of text and some questions we can use, or we can start our discussion without those. Okay, Pedro is our facilitator, and he's here. He's, as he calls himself, an architect who loves geometry. I think that's a good way to put these things together. Ana Silva Fernandez is with us. She's an architect and researcher, and she is actually an expert. She studies architectural heritage, and she has a PhD thesis on policies for improvement of self-produced areas on African territories. Very, very interesting, Anna. Maybe we'll have a lot to learn from that, and maybe your input could be actually taken from some material from your PhD. Bianca, where are you, Bianca? Hi.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. Oh, she was born on the Day of Women, I see here, right?
Yeah. Well,
and I always say that because our sessions, you know, this whole idea, let alone that it has been launched by a woman, you know, who is now heading the European Commission, Ms. van der Leyen. I think it's very much of good household keeping, you know, what happens to our planet today. I like to put this dimension in our discussion, you know, it's like good housekeeping. It's something innate for us. Francesca Sabatini, where are you, Francesca? Here you are. Hi.
Here. Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to the NEB. Candidate in Cultural Economics and the Department of Architecture and Territory in Reggio, Calabria. Juan, I remember Juan. I mean, I've seen Juan already in 2 of those events. He's a very faithful speaker we have. He's there every time. Nice to see you, but you wear a mask, so you're outside, right? It's still summertime.
Yes, I'm in university actually, so we kind of need to use that. And well, I was here for the whole day, so I had to stay here.
Right. And Natasha Isoff from Toulouse. I think we met before online as well, right? From Toulouse, also a heritage expert in many ways. Okay, I have sent you a text. I could actually make some points out of this text if you like, or you could go ahead and share your views or your approaches or your questions or your input or whatever you like after the really nice 2 keynotes we heard. I mean, I have to say that it stayed with me what Gonzalo Burns said, that this is a time to not leave anyone behind, really touched me, you know, in a way of having to reconsider communities and the way we function as architects. And I wonder, you know, I mean, we can discuss this right away. And of course, like all architects, I think they really have something to propose. I mean, we have housing problems that are amazing in my country. I'm in Athens. It's an ongoing issue for most of the 20th century and a tough one. So it is a very, very important topic to discuss and debate, I think. If you would like, I could give you the framework a little bit in my own words. I mean, we are discussing how we can overcome this division between, you know, this extreme dipoles, as we say, you know, the 2 opposites in the discussion. Maybe it's time to really compromise and bring these things together in a way, between traditional and innovation, between what we consider low tech and high tech, between what we would think as human-made and natural, you know, all these divides we have been actually working with on an intellectual level through the last 50 or 60 years, maybe can be overcome today, or they can be approached in another way. Of course, focusing on housing and how we can today really consider and find solutions to the crisis we face in cities. Some of the questions formulated for this session, I mean, we have 3, we can create more, of course. The one is how to combine traditional solutions, local knowledge and skills with innovation and modernization of practices, which basically also refers to traditional building techniques and high-tech building techniques. And we saw with like all architects, for example, one can definitely combine these things and make living better. How can we combine this and respond to present needs and future aspirations? What are the values to reconsider under the circumstances we face today? Another question to think about is how to take into account social and environmental impact of materials and construction process. And that goes, of course, for the housing sector. And the third question I have here suggesting is how to transform housing from product to process by designing towards collective participation, cultural bonding, and local income opportunities. I will return to the questions if you like, but at this point I would give you the floor. Pedro, maybe you have already a question or some input. I will keep notes. We both keep notes, right? For the wrap-up session.
Yes, I have my own questions and doubts, but I think as a facilitator, I should first give the floor to our members of the discussion.
Yes. Who wants to start? Anna, you want to start. I can see that. You can tell us a little bit about policies and impact. Yes.
Oh, okay, I can start.
Good. Oops. We lost her?
That is a severe case of shininess.
We lost
Oh,
Anna.
wait a second. Wait a second. She's coming in again.
Yeah. Maybe she just pushed the wrong button, you know. Here she comes.
Let's see if she.
I think my computer didn't want to start.
We had a lot of this today, you know. Okay, we're fine now. Okay, good.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know how you want to organize this. Maybe I have some notes on the questions, but maybe I'll start with the first one and then we make a round or something so that I don't speak a lot of time and we try to find a balance. And here for the first question on how to combine tradition and modernity and innovation, my notes were on how it seems that the roles of traditional solutions still need to be reframed, or still they are seen as an alternative, as something that is marginal or something that is left for the most curious professionals, but it's not really nuclear or not really thought about in continuous as part of the tools that we should use as professionals in our daily routines. And so often the traditional solutions are made, are replaced, are abandoned, are misinterpreted, and it seems that still we don't know enough about them. We don't know about their reasons or their capacities or their qualities. And on the one hand, when I think of it, I think on bonding. I think that firstly, we need to, there's a lot more work than on observing, studying, surveying traditional architecture, traditional solutions, materials, how they are inherited or transmitted throughout generations. But a lot less on experience, on testing it, on feeling, and on actually having an immersion of professionals on what it means to use and to adopt these techniques. So it seems that there's always this distance, there's always something that is kind of it's something different, almost exotic, that sometimes the most curious professionals choose to know more about and then go for it. But it's not something that is really part of the studies, of the nuclear training of professionals, and of really understanding them as natural tools. And natural.
That's a nice way to put it. Natural to,
of our profession. And then the step forward to reinterpret them. So we need to know them first, but then to reinterpret, to understand qualities, but also constraints, or also when they can apply, when they can be slightly changed or improved to fit a specific demand. When they can be arranged to be symbiotic with more recent or high-tech solutions, so that we don't get into extremes of only using one or using the other, but rather understanding, finding a balance. And maybe I will leave this as a start. I have other notes, but maybe we go on and continue on the conversation.
Yeah, I think the issue you just described is really very meaningful, because, I mean, me too. We keep visiting small villages and we survey things, but we somehow keep them, you know, in the aura of the past, of a tradition that cannot be employed today. Whereas building techniques and materials are very much alive and really available to be used today, as you said, to reinterpret them. That's a very good point. Who else would like to come in the first question? Okay, Juan, but you have to open your microphone.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
So I actually agree with Sana, because I have some of the same things she just mentioned as things I point out. And I think it's important to somehow keep this tradition and transform it into a way to be able to apply it. to the buildings and to the houses we're making nowadays, because this tradition can help into this circular economy and to reduce the carbon footprint, because the materials from the place are being used. There's an example here very close to Valencia, which is a house in Betra, which is completely made out of ceramic bricks, because there's quite a lot of tradition here, and I believe in Portugal too. So it's basically the model of the house. It comes out from the size of that brick, and everything in the house is made out of that, but in a very contemporary way. So it's a very modern house, completely built out of these big walls out of ceramic bricks. And it kind of, I put some notes also about the arts and craft movements throughout Europe, which kind of embraced this tradition, ways of doing things, kind of like crafty, kind of like by hand, which is also related to the place and to the way people do things in each place. So yeah, it's
Yes,
kind of
but
keep
not today.
tradition.
If you really want something handcrafted, you have to pay a lot of money. You know, this is also the challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
unless it's, you know, bricks created in Africa, for example, you know, mud bricks and things. But if you really want handcrafted materials and building technologies, they're very expensive. And there is always a challenge and the question, can one, you know, bridge that? Could we bring this into 3D printing, or could we somehow really mobilize technology so that we have the natural and simple and very good to live with solutions, you know, reinterpreted, as Anna says. I think it's a very good way to put it, you know. Yeah.
Yes, more than the handcraft making, it's more about reinterpreting, transforming this tradition and try to implement it, but not necessarily handcrafting. It was just the kind of way the arts and craft movement here in Spain tried to keep up with that tradition, more or less.
I think it really has to do also with, as we heard in the first keynote, by the first keynote speaker, it's not the material per se, it's the way of life, you know. Once we understand the connection, we can really use very simple materials again, I think.
Yes.
The thought.
And yeah, that's... What?
Do we have more thoughts? Does somebody else wants to add to this argument? Yeah, Bianca.
Yeah,
I have to come over to my computer to read your name. It's so tiny.
Okay. Yeah, I have to give my opinion, or just skip with the question.
Anything you think is the thing to say, you know, on the topic.
Yeah, yeah, I really agree about this material and really interesting. I also did like a project in Africa, so I deal with this material and new strategy. And I also think that it's really important to take in account the context, not just the material, and yeah, deal with this. And yeah, every context is different, so also the climate and everything. And what else? I have to think about. So I don't understand. Maybe my question for you. I don't understand why people still use a new technology, the high-tech, when there are a lot of really simple strategy in the tradition that we can use and reinterpret. Yeah, that is my question. I can understand.
Well, that's a very big discussion, I think. I mean, one of the problems is, you know, the construction market, construction industry, isn't it? I mean, it's not like in my country, actually, you can still do this. Architects have small scale projects, maybe more than other countries, but it's not so easy. I think the construction industry already imposes, you know, building technologies and materials which are industrialized. So it takes a very decisive step, you know, to say, I will move from this to that, or I will really upscale or recycle or do this on a large scale, which is happening in some countries already. Like in the Dutch countries, I think they have very much, you know, developed this idea of a cyclic economy and upscale and recycle for the building technology. And I think it's a good path to go if you want to go back to simple materials, but have them mainstream. Yeah. And also, I mean, when you said context, I really thought of climate as well. It's not just culture. I mean, being in the new European Bauhaus, which goes south, you know, we more or less belong to countries where you can live outdoors 9 out of 12 months a year, more or less, okay. Which already is a circumstance, it's a condition to have a simpler existence, you know. It affects materials too. Would you consider that context as well, the climate?
If I may add up to what you were saying about the construction market, like
Francesca.
Yeah, this is me. Yeah, not being an architect, but an economist. The first thing that came to my mind when I read about the intersection between the matter of housing and that of culture, especially, was the transformation that our cities have gone through with the creative and cultural economy. And so the way that cities, I take it from a grander scale and not the construction and building one, the way our cities and the housing in our cities have been shaped by this new interpretation of cultural and knowledge cities as great attractors. I would like to take it from a personal and imminent experience that I'm having right now. I am in Leeds, and at the moment I am in Leeds doing my visiting period here. And I could not prevent myself from noticing the predatory processes that you were mentioning in your thoughts. Yeah. In the sentence, because, for example, we can consider universities and knowledge creator on the one hand as hubs of innovation and of dialogue with the local community, but on the other hand, they have been attracted huge fluxes, which the city was not ready to welcome and to integrate to the existing knowledge bases and to the existing communities. And for this reason, the student housing is literally devouring the city center and transforming neighborhoods without accounting for the dialogue and the permeability between these two sectors, between these two communities. On the other hand, in Bologna, the city in which I've lived for most of my adult life, is characterized by a dramatic lack of student housing, and therefore lots of people have been renting their own apartments in the city center and now at the fringes to welcome students, but without an actual dialogue between the existing community and the students. So what we are creating, especially in cultural and knowledge cities, where the creative economy is pushing towards transformation, what we are creating is gated communities who do not dialogue between each other. And this has to do very much with culture as a process, and culture as two types of knowledge, the one produced in universities and the local ones, which have become very distant from each other. So I think that one of the things that we should definitely reason about when thinking housing and culture, besides the construction level, which is not the focus of my analysis, is how to merge, how to make porous the city, and especially knowledge and heritage cities, and how to redesign the shape of the city to make it more accessible to both residents and students, for example, and creatives. And so to really redesign policies for knowledge cities that consider the matter of housing as one relevant to the dialogue on culture itself.
You're really coming, you know, I mean, I work on a Horizon 2020 project, and we are at the point now where we have to propose policies. And this is where you realize, I mean, it's so true what you're describing, you know, a community is not something that can just be constructed or directed how to be done. And gated communities are not really communities, you know, they are a species of real estate development. It's not a community. So, you know, I have been wondering so much lately, and I have been thinking again, maybe architecture and maybe, you know, our expertise is after all not technology. It's not material. Actually, maybe we are humanities more than ever in this turn of things and circumstances, because if we talk about community building, which our project does, the one I was describing, it speaks about community and participation and whatever the FAR convention has really brought forth for heritage. But, you know, everybody talks about it, but how do you do it? How do you do it? I mean, looking at the housing we saw, right, with Lacolle Architects, I was thinking, how many of us do really want to share, you know, this space and that space and this kitchen and the other kitchen? I mean, what is our state of living really? I mean, it's a very open topic, but you cannot leave it apart. There is no way to really draft something substantial if you don't return to community dynamics, which are truthful and not imposed and not designed, you know. And how do you do that? And this is why I was so touched when Gonzalo Byrne said, oh, we should leave nobody behind, because this is such a compassionate way of really, you know, redefining the problem of communities in many ways.
Definitely. This is why I was discussing porosity.
Porosity is a good, yeah, word. But how do you do it? What policy would you propose? This is a challenge.
It definitely is. It definitely is. I think that like discussing a housing policy that pursues a mix of residents, something that challenges, you know, the gating of these communities. So like having student residents entirely gated in spaces where they can all be together, and on the other hand, pushing the other communities at the margin is not. Probably this is not the city that I would like to see in 10 years, you know.
Yeah.
But this is what has been happening. So I think that like creating housing models that are able, you know, through modularity, for example, to account for different types of residents, eliciting almost naturally, you know, this type of mixing, as well as designing a cultural offer that can be responsive to the needs of different people. You know, it's not just about creating the spaces, but also the material conditions for culture to merge, you know, and so to design a cultural infrastructure that is responsive to the needs of both residents and students, and to finally, you know, have them dialogue together. I do agree with you about the fact that, you know, communities cannot be designed, but on the other hand, we can have these communities meet, you know, in different ways, which is not something that they always do. It would be hard for me in Leeds, not knowing anyone, to, you know, meet a person from Leeds out of my very multi-ethnic and culturally diverse, you know, fellow colleagues around here. While in Bologna, it is very difficult to dialogue with the city residents unless there is an explicit intention to do so. So I would say that designing new housing methods that are able to merge, thinking of a new cultural infrastructure that is responsive to the needs of the people who dwell the city, and eventually creating moments of encounter which account also for students as citizens, not something that has been done very often, is my three directions, towards which I would orient a policy for creating better and more livable heritage cities.
Yeah, sounds difficult, but it's definitely a direction.
I know.
Yeah. Who wants to pop in here?
Maybe I
Natasha.
can. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe I can add something about the values to take into account and to have a reflection about it. I work on renovation in France, and I think today it's a big question for us to think about the combination of traditional solutions and modernity and innovation in the case of renovation, because we add different reality of sites, very different reality of site, and it's very difficult to understand the qualities, the problematics of each of case. And I think enlarge the values to take into account, it's very interesting and very complicated. In particular, use value, because I think in social housing in particular, it's a very important thing to take into account and to have a reflection about it. Because yes, I think it's a very interesting way to understand the reality of this kind of social housing. I don't know.
Yes, how would you go about? What would be the values you would somehow try to instill or bring forth or cultivate? There we go with policies again, in a way. I mean, how would you do that?
Maybe with a reflection about the different actors of the project, to take into account the different reflection about professional, habitants, users, and of each people who
mix many stakeholders, bring many stakeholders to the table.
Yes. Yes, but I think it's very difficult to have a global vision of these things, but maybe with a reflection about many examples, we could have some response to this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keeping notes. I hope I'll keep them properly. Does anybody else want to speak, or should we move to our next question? What do you think?
Maybe I will also add or highlight some questions or some points, because when there was the conversation or the topic on the construction market and the industry and how it changes the accessibility to materials and the logics of construction, I think that we also should take into account what Francesca was saying about the transformation of cities and of the territories in general, and also the rhythm in which this is taking place, and how to respond to that. And so often the construction industry is faster into providing solutions that end up being more affordable than the ones that are available at local level. Therefore, when we speak about the access to materials, not always the ones that are closer, geographically, physically closer to you, are more affordable or more accessible, and so are, well, and as well as the techniques and the skills. but therefore there's also this challenge of making of thinking of all of these dimensions in context, relating with the climate, but also relating with affordability and the access to the products or to the materials that are in front of us. And also to add to that, I also found it interesting when Juan was speaking about crafts, that it's not just about the result or the crafted work, but also about the skills. And therefore, maybe this could also be an aspect to be further developed or further paid attention to relate to what Francesca was saying about community dynamics, because crafts and these skills, this knowledge is also about creating, sharing, transmitting, but also changing throughout time. A tradition is alive, as Juan also mentioned, and therefore the conjugation of actors, of different people gathering for creating solutions could be also, it means also the conjugation of knowledge, of different natures of knowledge, more technical, more community, more institutional, but always discussing solutions that may be more equitable and may serve a diversity of publics and a diversity of demands.
Yeah. In many ways, the points you have all made, I think, are linked to time, to how long something takes to develop and to scale. I mean, the Athena democracy could only happen in a city that was so big and had so many people and actually not many women around. It's a question of scale, you know. And then if we look at mega cities just being built up in 10 or 14 days, and there are examples in China, you know, through this industry, which can really put very quickly, you know, the product. This is also our third point of discussion, you know. I mean, where do you discuss community? I mean, I happened to be in China for a while in 2017 in a school there, and I was looking at many of those projects, you know, really going up very quickly. And I was wondering, I mean, I was thinking, how can communities be created here? I mean, how can you think of a community if there is no street? And the building code actually in many Chinese prefectures says that the high rises have to be at least 9 or I don't remember, 12 meters apart, you know, which is the building code. But what does this really, what kind of public space does this give? I mean, this is what I mean, scale. I mean, the scale of public space is very important for all of this. Communities to meet, skills to come alive, people to do things together. I mean, think of that. I believe as designers, I mean, we should really be concerned with the scales we elaborate. And this really brings us to, I think, very fast to our last question here, which is, I believe, how to transform housing from products to process. It has to do with time and scale and community. I mean, by designing towards collective participation, cultural bonding, and local income opportunities. I know, we all have the face like, that sounds good, but where is it? You know, how do we do that? Well, you know, it's not that we know everything. Obviously, we know not much, or we couldn't change our world as much as we wanted, but this is why we talk. I mean, this is the real aim of the new European Bauhaus, to bring things into the discussion again. And you never know.
Maybe if I can add a little bit.
Sure, finally.
I was also being a little bit shy.
Okay.
in terms of developing estates for people, that there is the case of social housing, where there is a public responsibility, many times in the face of a government. And of course, in that case, there are possibilities to establish many different processes. But we also have the problem of self-built housing. And in my case, in my particular case, I'm worried with the materials employed and what is the consequence of these materials in the long term on the climate crisis. And in my opinion, the access to these very practical and easy ways to build, which are summarized in steel and concrete, the access to these materials will not be stopped to be used just with conscientization. Just as, for example, today in supermarkets in Portugal, you don't bring your shopping in a plastic bag, and it's not because of your own conscience, but because there were laws to do that. And there are also policies. Also policies for petrol cars, they are being reduced. So I think it's somehow policies are very important, and not every day people are aware of the building materials they can use next to their geographical areas, or are aware of architectural typologies. But I think policies have a big word on this, and my main enemy is typically concrete and steel, which account for 10% of global emissions.
Which the Bauhaus brought to us, which every Bauhaus architect is in love with. I mean, you know, my school, the National Technical University of Athens, is still very much like a old school modernist school. I think Porto has such traits like this too. And we always have the big debate about concrete, the big debate, you know, what's the imprint, what's the impact, how can we change this? Real, true modernism is concrete and steel, you know. I mean, when I was studying, I was really believing this, you know. We had teachers and professors who were going, when the sun would come down, we would go to construction sites and look at the shade, you know, at the relief, at the shape of concrete. Such love we had. And here we are discussing it in a very different context, and it's true, you know. And like any, I would say, like any step forward, you know, it takes guts. I mean, you have to really
change, right? On
get
the
off
60s,
what you used to and
on
what
the
you're
60s,
in
on the
love with.
70s, it was fashionable to smoke, you know. Everybody smoked, but now there's another conscious. So
yeah, but how do we do this? How do we make the step and the transfer? I mean, that's why we are talking to each other. I mean, that's, you know, when van der Leyen said, oh, the new European Bauhaus should bring all designers together and we should really discuss what is the new city, what is the new structure, what is the new ways to do things and all that. I was surprised, because usually architects are not really, we are not put in the center, in the heart of that discussion. You know, we are the guys who build it and design it, but we are not the people to be asked when the programmatic question is there, or when the shift of the paradigm is there, usually. So this is what is really under change, I hope. Definitely a topic of discussion, definitely.
Yes, and today,
I would like to ask you all, I mean, didn't you learn something from the time of the pandemic? I mean, wasn't there a change, whether we wanted it or not, you know, in scale, in time, in the way we experienced our homes? I mean, I hadn't been in my own house for years, really, so many hours. And I mean, if you like to share, I mean, what was your what is the thing you learned from the pandemic as far as our communities, our futures, our shared future is concerned? If I may ask a fourth question, which I didn't send you.
Yeah, my response might be a little bitter actually, because like the paradigm which at least I experienced during the pandemic is very different from what I am experiencing now, you know. So there was a time in which I would be locked actually in my parents' house in the countryside, enjoying for the first time a walk in nature, because like there was literally nobody around. But as soon as time came, that activities began to be mixed again. You know, you could do both digital and physical. I went back to Bologna, went back to traveling, and boats kept, you know, polluting the seas, and we went back, you know, to a paradigm which I think was very easily recovered. You know, so we are desperately longing, you know, for a takeaway from this pandemic, which I do not think that our economy really grabbed. So I really wish that there was a takeaway, but I guess that the economic world and the economic processes to which we are accustomed did not change. And in fact, those who were not supposed to be left back were actually exactly where they were before the pandemic, and probably some other of them have eventually joined them. There are no studies, for example, on how many homeless people, on the increase of homelessness, for example, in Italy, but I know from some like preliminary data that they have increased significantly in Milan, for example, and in Bologna. So I do not think that the auspicated, you know, shift towards care has actually reached our cities. So yeah, my takeaway is a very bitter one about what we have learned from the pandemic.
No, it's a very realistic one, but I was more asking really. I mean, I agree with you, and we have even more unemployment in Greece. I mean, our young generation is even more affected. You know, as if it wasn't enough that in Greece we had the huge economic crisis and blah blah. I mean, our youth is like really attacked, and they were attacked again by the pandemic. So they couldn't live like students. They couldn't, you know, it was. But what I was more discussing was the first part, what you said, you know, that we all of a sudden had to slow down. We had to stay home. So we started to have a little bit of a glimpse, you know, in a more slow human rhythm, maybe. And what would that teach us? That's what I was asking, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we will have a choice to actually, you know, decide where do we want to stand, you know, in this, because like I really enjoyed, you know, this shift and the ability, you know, of having the opportunities at my reach without having to leave the countryside. But then the paradigm leaves you very little choice, you know, like you have experienced this for quite a short time, and you say, "Oh, I might like it," but then here we are back to our frenzy, you know, to our usual frenzy. So I like in
yes
terms of,
and no,
like,
yes and no.
immaterial, yeah, in terms of immaterial takeaway, I would say that yes, we have learned how to slow down, and I wonder whether there will be an actual push, you know, towards this in the modalities in which we are working and living our cities and our house.
Does anybody else want to share their experience or their insights of this pandemic? What, as far as the community or our spaces are concerned, or our way of life? Because at the end of the day, culture is really the way we live.
I think I might want to say something, but I'm changing the scale of that space you're talking. If we get into a more domestic size, I think we all learned something about our houses and how they are designed, I guess.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
A lot of the time, our rooms became our workspace, our sleep space. If we were locked from our family members, it might also become our the place we were eating. So we kind of I guess we all kind of started to reflect how we were living that space, And in case this repeats again, or anything different happens that makes us leave our houses different, how we can adapt them, or how we can make houses that we can live differently, and they are more adaptable to the changes of the way we're living.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Okay, so everybody else was just cool with the pandemic, I can think. Well, for me, it was an amazing change of perception of the city I live in, of the space I live in, of human relations. I am still very annoyed that we do everything online. I mean, I see people and colleagues in reality, which I saw them when I went to Dublin. I was like so amazed, you know. I mean, I realized how much society community is extremely important, you know. Once we lose that dimension, that public dimension, I think everything else is thin air.
I think that on the middle of the pandemic, there was, I don't know if this happened outside of Portugal, but we had like a slogan, which was like a rainbow saying, vai ficar tudo bem, everything is going to be all right, you know? And everybody posted this, and kids made drawings and stuff like that. And then some people on the public sphere started saying, no, it's not going to be everything all right. Everything is going to be exactly the same as it was. And I started to understand that that might be true. And actually that's the sad reality, in my opinion. So what do I mean by that? There was a moment in which we had like the confinement, people had to stay home. And but then you could go out to refresh yourself. So then you could run on the streets, there were no cars, suddenly everything was more organized. So there were some good things about it. But in the middle of that time, I had the fear that those good things were not going to last. And now that things are returning to normal, the bad things are returning to normal. So cars are returned, things get disorganized once again. So
entropy is back.
I think no, not that, but we have now the flexibility of more online meetings for the good or for the bad, but maybe that's one of the few things that is going to stay, and more personal hygiene for everybody.
Which means that this community process has been the big word. It has been detached from the territory, you know, it's not territorial anymore. A lot of communal processes can leave behind territory, and that's quite interesting. Anyway, you heard my alarm clock. It's 6:28 o'clock in Athens. I think we are, we've been through our hour, and I didn't even realize. It's a pity that Professor Giftopoulos couldn't be here. He tried, but he had an emergency. I'm very sorry. But he says hello to everybody, and hopefully he will be one of our next workshops with us. He's a colleague of mine. So I would like to thank you all very much. I have a lot of notes here, as you see. So I'll try to do my best and make a wrap up and bring these points of view into our last session, which is a wrap up. It's in 40 minutes, I think, right, Pedro? It's now there is a film.
Everything is a little bit late now. I'm not sure if we're going to keep up the original schedule.
Everything is late, but I think that the next thing on our schedule is a film, no?
Yes.
And we will resume, we will meet again and share our points. Yeah, there's a film exhibition, and then there will be like a recap session, a short session where we can share the points made by all workshops.
Yes, it should be.
And then see what's coming next, the next workshop in Zagreb. So it was very, very nice to have you on my iPad. I wish I could shake hands, but I can't. So thank you very much. Thank you, Pedro, for helping us.
Thank you.
And we will meet very soon again. Let's enjoy the movies and the films.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
You have the deck, right, Pedro? You have the...
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Thank
will
you.
stop recording now. Bye.